All right, everyone, the time is now 6:30. I'd like to call the Board of Finance meeting to order. And all rise. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Tom Sinkewicz, Ted Dumaine, Travis Irons, Don Cavella is excused absence, Kim Medlin,
Here.
Gary Stallborn,
Here.
Keith Streeter. Here. Okay, let the record show, Keith, your very first meeting, you get voting rights in replacement of Don. Thank you. Next item, acceptance of minutes from the October 30th, 2019 meeting. Minutes have been posted and distributed. Any questions or comments?
I move the minutes be accepted as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to accept the minutes from the October 30th, 2019 meeting. All right, next item under new business.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
can we get an introduction to the new members and the welcome thing?
we can, and that's actually what I was just about to do. Yeah. So first thing, before we get into the first item, which is discuss and act upon filling an alternate vacancy, that's just what I wanted to explain real quick. Is so we have on the Board of Finance, we have 6 full member positions and 2 alternates. So what I would like to do is to give the opportunity for our new members to certainly introduce themselves, because they are new to it and not necessarily recognized by some of our regular participants here at the Board of Finance meeting. So, Ken, Keith? Good.
I'll start. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Medlin. I'm very excited to be a part of this board. I have a significant amount of experience between my time in New York Life Insurance Company, working in their corporate finance department, and doing the budget for Mohegan Sun. So I'm excited to take the knowledge and experience I have from that and my educational background and bring it here for the town of Plainfield. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Keith Sheely. Not as experienced as Ms. Medlin, but I too am excited. I have a deep affinity for knowing where my tax dollars are going, so I'm excited to get started and get to work.
Welcome aboard.
Yes. And just to clarify again, so everyone knows, Keith holds the alternate position, which is filled by a Democrat in his case, and Kim, being a Republican, is one of our full members. So with the first item in mind, what we are here tonight to do first is to fill a vacancy which did not have a name on the ballot to fill it. So that's why the last person to hold that alternate position was David Saros, and it went vacant officially on election day. His time ended. So because there was no one on the ballot to fill it, it went vacant, and then from election day, there was approximately 30 days for the Board of Finance to fill that vacancy. If we do not succeed in filling the vacancy within 30 days, it then gets turned over to the Board of Selectmen to then fill that vacancy. The vacancy cannot be held by a Democrat, because we already have the Democrat filling the other alternate seat, so it needs to be a Republican, Libertarian, or another third-party recognition to hold that seat. Otherwise, as long as they are a confirmed resident in town, anybody who fits that criteria can go for it. For the record, the only person to formally express interest to myself as the chair and the town clerk was Mr. Matt Radin. He did actually write an official letter of interest and sent it to myself and the town clerk. So that is, ideally, that's what you should do, but again, you don't necessarily have to. You can show up tonight at the meeting and certainly express interest and fill the vacancy if you are nominated. So with that said, what I'm going to do now is open the floor for nominations, unless there are any questions about that position. No? Okay. So at this time, I open the floor for nominations.
I'll nominate Matt Lee.
Second.
Okay, so Matt Radin, nomination. Any other nominations?
Move nominations be closed.
Okay, we have a motion to close the nominations. Is there a second? Okay, there's a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nominations are now closed. What I would usually like to do is give Mr. Radin an opportunity to just introduce himself and say a few words, but I don't believe he's here this evening. So again, he did officially send in his letter of interest. I know many people here do know him from his time on Board of Ed. I personally really enjoyed my time while he was on Board of Ed talking to him. A lot of times when I would attend Board of Ed meetings to get updates on what was going on with their side of the budget, and then of course come and discuss it at Board of Finance meetings, he would usually be the one I would automatically talk to. A lot of times he would have some very interesting 2 cents as far as how he interpreted the Board of Ed budget and suggestions that he had, which weren't necessarily agreed with the majority with the Board of Ed. But nevertheless, I mean, he gave his 2 cents, both publicly and anytime I ever asked him for, what's going on with this with Board of Ed, what have you heard about this? And he was always upfront with the information, let me know, his honest opinion. And then same thing with Board of Finance meetings in the last budget season. He consistently attended, always gave his opinion again publicly, and then would come approach me later on and give 2 cents. So I personally have enjoyed, being a friend of Matt and working with him on the Board of Ed side. So I think it would be great now if he would be with us now on the Board of Finance and having that interesting perspective of having seen the Board of Ed side. We all know that with the Board of Ed being the biggest chunk of our budget, it also tends to take up the most time during budget season and having the most tax dollars go to it. And of course, there's a lot of discussion as far as what's being spent where, and if we should even increase certain levels of funding within the Board of Ed. So I believe Matt would be able to contribute quite a bit on the Board of Finance in that regard. So if there are no other comments, I would entertain the motion to vote on Matt Radin to fill the vacancy position.
I move that Matt Radin
Just
be.
call for a vote.
Yeah.
You have to call for a vote.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I call for the vote. So
All in favor?
you can show of hands just so we're all clear on this one. So. Okay. All right, very good. I will.
Yeah, I guess that wasn't a motion.
Yeah. No, so it was. So yeah, don't put him down as the motion. I called the vote. All right. So what I will do is then that is great that we are all in agreement and have now officially voted Matt Radin to fill the vacancy. So I will get in touch with him and make sure he's reminded he has to go visit the town clerk to get his information filled out and get sworn in. So, thank you. All right, next item under new business on B is election of officers. So this is our annual time of year to decide our slate of officers for the Board of Finance. Our current slate, as it's been for the past year, has been myself, Tom Sinkewicz as chairman, Travis Irons as vice chairman, and Ted Germain as secretary. I have asked in talking to the Board of Finance members if there was anyone interested in any of the positions. The only change that I heard is Ted will not be seeking to be selected as secretary again. However, in talking to Mr. Stallboyne, he would be interested in that position. Nobody expressed interest again in chair or vice chair. I can say I am willing to serve another year as your chairman, and having spoken to Travis, he's willing to serve another year as vice chair. So I leave it to the board to decide. We can go position by position, or you can also nominate a slate, which could be, again, having discussed who is interested in what. It would be myself as chair, Travis as vice chair, and Gary Stallboyne as secretary, based on who is interested in what. But if you don't want to do it that way and want to do it individually, we can do it too. So I leave it to you.
I'd like to nominate a slate. I'll nominate for the chairmanship, Tom Sinkewicz. Vice chair, Travis Irons. Secretary, Gary Stallboyne.
Second.
Okay. Motion is second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of this slate of officers signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries to accept the slate of officers, Tom Sinkewicz as chair, Travis Irons as vice chair, and Gary Styleboyne as secretary. All right. Is
Kyle is not here, he said he would be here, but.
Very good. So we are, on the next item is an update on our computer purchase. So for those of you who attended the meetings earlier this fall, you might remember that we had Kyle here to give us an update again. He had also updated us during the past budget season as far as we were at a critical mode of needing to upgrade software and computers because we're getting to the point where we had an actual situation where they were crashing and also getting to the point of software expiring and not being able to be compatible. So he emphasized to us that it's something that had to be done, and we had approved upwards of $48,500, upward of that amount that we would put towards it. And the last update I heard from Kyle is that we were still coming in under. So since he was not here tonight to fill us in of where we stood with that, I don't know if you have any updates on that.
Well, Kyle did provide a short memo, I think it's on page 5 of the handout, that details exactly what was expensed and which vendor he sought out throughout his process. So I know what the detailed expenditure list was given to the new first selectman, Mr. Cunningham. As far as where we are, we're about $10,000 under. We just got a few products in, a few servers in. I'm not exactly sure as far as the timeline of the installation for those new items, but I do know that he is working with the buildings department and building inspections and trying to kind of man both departments in implementing all the IT hardware and efficiently provide enough staff for the building department. So the implementation is difficult to say, but right now we're under budget. We're getting what we need to supplement, or we'll just ensure that we're operating at a capacity that's efficient for a municipality our size. And I think his selection process in trying to find the lowest bidder was efficient.
Okay. Mr. First Selectman, do you have anything to add on that subject? No? Okay. Very good. As for the members, again, any questions or comments on the computer purchase?
Just, we still have to add the $34.60 to the base price of $37,220 for those hard drives and the controllers, which would make it $40,680.
Well, we're definitely going to get closer to the 48 that was budgeted.
Right.
But
On the base contract is $37,220. Then down below, he still needs to purchase 4 hard drives at $750 a piece. And
Correct.
then 2 controllers. So you add that to the base price. Okay.
Yeah. So we're, yeah.
Yeah, but you're still below.
Correct.
Your
And
appropriate
it's
money.
gonna, that money that was allocated will be expended. It's just a matter of trying to take care of what we've already purchased based on the manpower that we're currently working with. When these items come in, it does take a bit of time to implement them. I mean, I know the assessor still needs some software and hardware implemented. So it's not as, the implementation process isn't as expedient as
So
just
there's,
receiving it.
so there's still maybe some software added to this price?
There,
Okay.
there are a lot of needs throughout town hall in terms of IT. We're trying to prioritize that and make sure that the what is upgraded is what is most important is upgraded first. I think the number one thing right now we have is the number of computers that are operating on Microsoft 7, and that the warranty and support system Microsoft is providing is going to expire starting January. So just implementing and upgrading new software is going to be a challenge for Kyle as well.
Is this going to give us state of the art?
No. No, I don't know any municipality that operates under state-of-the-art technology.
This is not an aspartame.
Yeah. But it's gonna give us, it's gonna bring us up to speed with what the times, I think. It's gonna help us operate in a more efficient manner, comparable to other municipalities.
So in 3 years, we'll do this all over again.
I don't know about 3, maybe 7.
Quick question too, is the letters, is it like desktops, not laptops?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Is it a lot easier to upgrade
It
in the
depends,
future?
yeah, some departments may require a laptop. I mean, I think the assessor may require a laptop based on, or a tablet of some sort, but those details have to be worked out. I wouldn't necessarily, don't hold me to those types of purchases.
I'm thinking hopefully it'll be more desktops.
We should
For future updates.
Yeah.
I would say on that note, I mean, this should get us by for quite a while, but I would say on the same note though, I'm hoping that we don't repeat this like in the future. Because basically we got to the point, as I said in the beginning, where we got to this critical mode where like now it's basically like an emergency and we're at crunch time. You know, the hope would be to plan ahead, you know, and try to, you know, avoid getting to this point, you know, not just for computers, but just in general with other things too. If we can try to avoid being in emergency mode.
Well, the thing that we need to bear in mind as the Board of Finances is when this budget comes before us during budget season, and, we're looking to trim, you gotta remember, when you trim, you end up in this situation. So,
Which was done for a while. Yeah, no, very good point.
And I think that's, one of the concerns as well. In order to stay under the budget that we put for this, Kyle really had to go with bare bones for everything for the computer upgrade. So we also have to be aware of that as well, that we're gonna probably have to upgrade sooner because it is bare bones and pieces versus actual like CPUs and things of that nature, so.
How about 3 years?
Not state of the art.
I wouldn't say 3.
I wouldn't say
Yeah.
3, but we'll definitely have to reevaluate probably sooner than.
Or maybe stagger some type of
Exactly, that's what we
implementation.
should be
So
doing.
we don't take it.
Start with one, I don't know.
Yeah, set, figure out a cycle throughout town hall where implementation is regular on an annual basis. This way we can budget accordingly.
All right, any other questions or comments on computer purchase? No, all right. Moving on to item D, which is update on town vehicles. So we have, when did this happen on it? Was
Yeah,
it a month ago?
A little less than a month
A
ago.
little less than a month ago, yeah. We have, one of our town vehicles had a safety issue and had to be taken offline. And this was the one used for building inspection?
Correct.
Yeah, building inspection. So, the problem there is we've been able to get by and kind of do a shuffle and using other town vehicles that are already, safe to use and are already being used. But it's also kind of stretching it thin with the vehicles that we have, trying to meet the needs of the different departments. So while we've been able to get by with this situation that came up a matter of weeks ago, in the long term, we need to make a decision as far as how we can go to try to get this vehicle replaced. So that's why I put this on the agenda, is we haven't really discussed this yet at a Board of Finance meeting. I remember it just happened a couple weeks ago and it just didn't fit, timing-wise, didn't make it to the last agenda, so I wanted to discuss it, and then we will need to figure out again what the next step will be.
So, we have Appendix D, I know we didn't make copies for everybody, but the Board of Finance has copies of a list of vehicles that are, we would, are available to purchase currently. We have one vehicle in particular that is at the very top of the packet, and it's a good price for the mileage that we're seeking. There are certain specifications needed for a building department vehicle, one being that it's four-wheel drive. There are a lot of off-road circumstances that the building department may have to venture onto, but ensuring that it's four-wheel drive is important. What we don't want is something that's not durable, and again, like the computer purchases, we'll make a poor purchase and have to maybe purchase another vehicle in the next 5 years or 6 years. That being said, the reason we like the vehicle at the top is because, on the top of the packet, is because it only has 6,000 miles on it. And comparatively, when you look through the packet, based on the mileage and the prices and the specifications required and the different types of quality of vehicles, we feel that the sticker price of $20,000 for this particular vehicle is worth it and will last a lot longer than some of the other vehicles. So for a long-term purchase, this would be the ideal direction to go to. That being said, we would also prefer to use the fund balance to make this purchase because it's not in the budget and this is an unexpected budget item. Building department needs a vehicle and it's definitely a worthwhile purchase long-term. I know I'm not expecting a decision on this tonight. If you'd like to vote on it tonight, that'd be great. We'd be able to move forward with the purchase. Again, the sooner the better. If you'd like to come to a consensus at a later point, that's fine. But I know this is a last minute thrust upon the board and asking for a decision of funds.
Right, and with what Ron just said, that's why, as I put on the agenda, I didn't put that we were necessarily acting upon this tonight. I wanted to get an update because this is the first time that we formally discussed it at a Board of Finance meeting. So, wanted to get this, make sure that the Board of Finance members had this information, and also considered our other options. Now, one option, Ron, that I remember you and I had talked about was there any possibility of any vehicles from the police department that were going to be getting retired that could be repurposed?
None, because they're not four-wheel drive.
Okay.
That's the one caveat that prevents us from using retired police vehicles.
My issue is with the purchasing procedure, as far as getting bids.
Well,
That's
no, I understand. I guess because it's an emergency purchase, we can circumvent the bid pricing by creating a list of comparable prices. I guess, here's Kyle. As far as changing, as far as being in compliance with the town's procurement laws, we are, if this is an emergency purchase, which it is. We've sustained over the last couple of weeks without it, but if this is a purchase that the town needs, we didn't budget for it. If we had budgeted for it, we'd more likely go out to bid because it's not an emergency purchase.
I'm ready to act on it now, if everybody else is.
I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So can we just clarify for everyone what exactly is the issue with the car?
It's dead.
It's dead.
Was it the body,
I
Ron?
thought it was.
Kyle, could you elaborate on the problems with the car that died?
The one that died?
Yeah.
The front end rotted out. I've got actually pictures of it where the front springs are gone. They kind of like bent because it rusted out. It actually popped a hole through the top of the wheel well. It's kind of in like this. It's got 171,000 miles on it too.
And we kind of looked at all of the other options in terms of maybe preventing by purchasing a car at this point. Like, I know we had talked about using a retired police cruiser, but currently right now they are sharing a car, a town car, correct?
Correct.
And what exactly is the schedule between the two departments that are using it? Are they both full-time using the car like 8 hours a day, or?
Yeah, Kyle,
Yeah, Kyle, if
could you elaborate on the schedule?
Yeah, you might. I don't know if you heard that question, Kyle.
No, I didn't.
Okay, yeah, if you could just repeat.
So my question is, the two departments that are sharing the vehicle right now, what exactly is their schedule? Are they both using the car or expected to use the car 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? or
Depends on the
certain
inspections
days?
that need to be done. The assessor has their own schedule for inspections, and there's been times where she's needed the car and we were using it.
Right.
So it's been kind of a pain in the neck at this point. We need to have a four-wheel drive vehicle for the building official. We go in and out of muddy lots all the time with new houses. We're on call 24/7. If it's snowing, we gotta get to where we gotta get to. If a car drives into a building, we have to get there. Well, it could be a fire, it could be anything, but we should definitely have four-wheel drive.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that update regarding the town vehicle?
I'm curious to know, Gary, did you have any other thoughts on what Ron said related to it being an emergency purchase and the procurement?
I'm trying to remember what the charter says. One likes not to have it.
Well, it's not so much the charter, it's the,
Well, everybody wants to follow the charter.
well, the charter points to the procurement policies. So if you, essentially, we're in a roundabout way referring to the charter, but it's in the procurement policies manual that says an emergency purchase, or designates the rules surrounding an emergency purchase.
And the only stipulation of that is just coming in with comparables, which are in this packet.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, you know, quotes.
Yeah.
I mean, for most vehicle purchases, you're usually working off of quotes.
Warranty on this thing? There's a normal, this is my use it for 90 days.
The warranties usually are around 50,000, right?
I don't know how they do that on a used vehicle. Typically, I think it's X miles and so many days, like 90 days and 10,000 miles maybe. They're not gonna give you $50,000 mile warranty.
Maybe with the dealer notes, it does say, it says it's new.
If there's more information you'd like us to bring back to you within the next couple of days, we can do that. But like I said, I understand this is last minute.
Right, and so that's kind of what I did want to, once we conclude any other questions or comments, I did want to make a clarification as far as, so where do we want to go as a board next? So we don't necessarily need to decide tonight. As you saw, I didn't word it like that to be acted upon tonight because I wanted to digest this information. And we have the opportunity to, as Ron just said, request additional information if need be. So we don't need to do it tonight. However, it is a bit time sensitive. So in that case, when would we make the decision? Is what I would ask the members.
I think it should be done tonight.
I'm ready.
I mean, it's the inevitable, right? So, I mean, rather than bringing us back together next week because he's gonna find out if it has the balance of the factory warranty, seems silly. So,
Will you accept the motion?
We can. If we could just let the record reflect that we need to change amend the way it's written to say that we are also acting upon it. So could I get a motion for that?
a motion that the agenda be amended to show that we're gonna act on this purchase.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of amending the agenda to also act upon this item on the update of the purchase of the town vehicle, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
I make a motion, we buy the 2018 Renegade Latitude 4x4 SUV for the total number of $20,042.25 to be taken out of the fund balance.
Second motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to make the purchase of the Renegade Latitude 4x4 SUV 2018 for the price of $20,042.25 from the fund balance. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. One opposition and one abstention. Motion carries. All right, next item, item E, to discuss the economic development ideas to grow the grand list and fund balance. So, for those of you who were at our last Board of Finance meeting, you might remember we discussed that a little bit. And it's kind of along that same line of, we brought it up for just discussion and kind of throwing some ideas out there on the table. By no means were we planning on making decisions on this, and by no means by putting those ideas out did that mean that that's the way the Board of Finance is leaning. So I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding, thinking that because we had mentioned certain ideas, such as business loan programs, that meant that that's the direction we're looking at going in. It was a thought, it was something to maybe think about, get more information about, but again, not something that we're looking to push or act upon. So along that same line, I'm certainly willing to elaborate more on any of those ideas or bring up any other new ideas to the table, because as all of you I'm sure do remember too, in past years that we've talked about how, I mean, that's an ongoing issue, and it's been an issue for a long time for our town. We need to try to figure out ways to grow the grand list and the fund balance, but it's of course no simple answer to do so. There can be a lot of repercussions and different methods and ways of going about it. So that's kind of what we wanted to do, is look at the pros and cons of what could we, maybe look at as a town, but keeping in mind of, would we want to consider it because it could actually kick back, and have a negative effect on us. So, I certainly respect any other ideas that Ron may have for us to consider, but certainly any members, if you have any thoughts too, this is the time to throw them out there and consider.
Are we looking for a full-time economic development coordinator? Is that something a selectman can entertain?
Kevin, yes, I recognize our first selectman. You could mention anything.
That would be the plan at this time, but again, I'd have to go through all of the budget process to find out if we have any money available for this current cycle. If not, I would definitely bring it up into the next budget cycle as a request.
But there is a plan to do it, whether
Yes.
it be now or later?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say that when I was on EDC, we had the small business loans, but what it was originally, it was grant money from the state. It wasn't town money, and we basically used it as a revolving loan program, so we got it free from the state, and we loaned it and got interest, and we just kept rotating the money back out. That's what it was. It wasn't taxpayer money at that time.
So what's in the memo is exactly what was in last month's memo, and it's, again, just a conversation topic to try and create a context for what we're trying to do in town. We've got a significant fund balance, and it could be used to benefit the overall quality of life in the town. Whether you want to target specific businesses or you want to try and create different policies, you should think long-term and short-term. Just to, again, create the conversation to branch off into maybe some other ideas. We could briefly touch on the topics we discussed last month, especially for the people who weren't here. One being, a longer-term plan of tackling possibly the opioid crisis. I did talk to some people after last month's meeting, just to clarify where we were coming from, and it's worth talking again. But this is more of an overall long-term procedure that has nothing to do with policing. It has everything to do with preventive measures and rehabilitative measures. And if you get those people back into the workforce, you can create a more healthy environment for the town. One, you're eliminating people who are prone to crime. Two, you're creating tax-paying residents, and you're creating a work environment in the town that's necessary, because essentially you want to have people live, work, and visit Plainfield. So that's the overall mindset that we're working towards. Again, it's not a policing issue when we're talking about the opioid crisis. It's more of a preventive and rehabilitative long-term solution to eventually building the grand list. And then the other one is a town-sponsored business loan program. It's more of a bigger loan program than what you would offer for a small business. You possibly creating an attraction for the town of Plainfield. I know there used to be a dog track in Plainfield, and that brought a lot of people from outside of Plainfield to Plainfield, created a nice tax base for the town as well. That's what we're hoping to I guess, facilitate or create an idea for, again, nothing is definitive right now, but these are the ideas that we're hoping, context we're trying to create for the town. You know, thinking of ways to make people visit, work, and live in Plainfield. So that's essentially it.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Any other comments, discussion?
Yeah, again, when I was on EDC, we did a study, and it came out to what we figured would be the best businesses to come to town. I think one would be like warehousing, bottling, and some other ones. The last one on the list is retail. Would be the last thing on the list for you.
Is there anything you want us to look into? Anything you want us to research? Anything we could come back to, add to the discussion next month? You said bottling, warehousing, research?
You got aquifers, yeah?
Is there a commission existing now?
Yeah. This is, I think, you know, this is definitely something we can, you know, coexist with, yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, I know that one option, or one hot topic that a lot of citizens discussed in recent times has been the void without better value being in its spot. And have we considered grocery, businesses trying to find one that could come? And as was my understanding is that we have actually gone down the list of other small type grocery markets, or even bigger box store types as far as would they consider. A notable one being Market Basket. I know I personally have gone to Market Basket up in Massachusetts, great grocery store, but I think at the end of the day, I don't believe that they're interested in coming. And we have actually, again, reached out to them and found that out. Now, it's not to say that we can't keep trying, certainly on that subject of trying to big wide, but that's, I know, something a lot of people are curious about is there any hope of bringing that type of business back?
That's what they call it capitalism.
If food deserts are an issue, if people are forced to go to Big Y at a higher sticker price, I mean, that's something we can possibly circumvent, and on behalf of the town, absolutely, we should try.
I think the difficult aspect with that, however, is these large supermarkets and corporations, they just solely look at demographics, and on paper, we're not exactly the demographic that bigger supermarkets would want to come in and talk to, and I think that's something that we're struggling with, because there are supermarkets that are comparable and actually cheaper and healthier options compared to Big Y, but they go solely based on demographics, and we just don't have it. So I think that's something that we also are combating with as well for that.
It's definitely a point to consider. I mean, we, in an effort to possibly help the town, I think Board of Ed does a farmer's market of some sort, something comparable to that, maybe on a minor scale, talking to vendors to have them come in and have a Saturday farmer's market for residents and offer different types of goods that they might otherwise get gouged at some of the bigger markets. It's something that could benefit the taxpayer and lighten their weekly or monthly expenditure and house budget.
Yeah, and that did come up at an Economic Development Commission meeting. I think it was a special one last month that I sat in on and attended. And part of the presentation that they had was talking about, again, what are some various programs or ways to attract more customers into town, but especially more business, or to support your local businesses. So that was one of them. Is a lot of towns do have some type of farmers market, but do they expand upon that? Try to have other type of vendors, local vendors present there as another opportunity to get them out there, while you're also pushing for the local fruits and vegetables, to be sold. So, it was an idea of, you can make a lot out of a farmer's market than just the standard thing. It's just what you want to do with it.
I think we ought to think big, instead of saying that, demographics ain't right for the big businesses. If you don't ask them, trust me, they'll never come. I say ask them. But the thing we need to consider is what kind of an incentive It's coming to that, guys. We don't want to give incentives, but that's what's going to bring somebody in. Now, what that might be, I don't know. I don't know. Kevin, have you been thinking along those lines at all, being in business with incentives?
There's state programs are starting to swap out. We used to have the enterprise zone, which is still active now, but your applications are starting to stop because they're stopping the program soon. They're going to a different program, and I've actually just discussed this with Ann Dauphiné and Heather Summers about that. The opportunity zones are now something that's active in the state of Connecticut. We're not listed as an opportunity zone, but we're going to put an application in for doing just that, and to have some opportunity zones within the town of Plainfield.
Well, what about the town itself?
Well, we do have ordinance 103 that helps out to have small businesses be able to, we have had a couple of businesses actually took advantage of that recently, so they do help to keep them here and make more businesses. So I believe K&H was one of them. I believe that we also have the Motorsport moved on to the old bowling alley, so that's another one that took advantage of it. We'll see if we can try to promote that more for businesses to help to model and stay. And again, really, it's the Economic Development Commission that's going to be helping to promote and work on getting different businesses in town. So we'll see what we can do to help them out tremendously. I know you were on before, and I'm trying to do something with that, exactly what you mentioned before, bringing back that revolving loan fund to be viable, so it helps to have the really mom and pop small businesses to start back up again. So we're looking into that, and I'm looking forward to working with the Economic Development Commission to see what we can do to stimulate.
So how exactly are we putting in these requests for supermarkets and such? Or are we making phone calls, or are we just doing it online?
This is just a conversation right now.
No, I know, because
No, but the progress thus far, yeah.
We had
I
previously.
don't know if you knew anything about it. I could also ask Kathy, our third selectman, if you had anything to mention on that, because I know you were present when, obviously, Better Value went out of business.
So
and then
I can say that we did, we reached out by telephone, and again, you're talking about demographics. A couple of the supermarkets need demographics of 200,000 people in a certain mile radius. So if you look at the northeast corner, we're not going to fit into some of those, but we reached out to every single market that we could think of, including Market Basket. I mean, we even reached out to Whole Foods, which I know is kind of a specialty, but we reached out to every single supermarket. And the other thing that you have to know is that a supermarket cannot go into the Better Value, so it would need a different location to go into.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Any other questions or comments?
I would also suggest possibly reaching out to the casinos, who I think are a major variable in the economic development of Eastern Connecticut. And I think we have the benefit of having somebody with a little bit more insight as far as the businesses, the casinos are concerned. But you know, I'm not exactly. I don't frequent the casinos, but I'm not exactly sure how much the residents of Eastern Connecticut and Rhode Island frequent the casinos as well. But I think in terms of creating an economic development that competes with what you have in the casinos is difficult unless the population is going to increase, and unless you have a larger group of people to service. You know, if you're trying to attract people to visit Plainfield and take some of their money that comes from outside of other communities, you're going to be competing with an entertainment factor that the casinos provide. If you want to go to a nice restaurant, sometimes people might be more inclined to go to a casino or spend some of the extra money that they have than keep it in town. So I think that's a variable to consider, and possibly seeking their help in trying to develop this part of Connecticut, especially in Plainfield, economically is important. I think that the grant that they provide is not enough to supplement the ramifications they create in a number of different ways. Mostly, I think, disproportionately taking revenue away from municipalities. So it's just a thought process and how to get them involved in helping the communities surrounding the casinos in a way that does more than just create jobs. Just an idea. Something to think about for next month.
All right, any other questions, comments, discussion?
Are we getting the Board of Ed involved with this program? There's something they can do for us? I talked to a few people that say, we'll come to a town with a good education system. So are we involving them? Maybe we should consider that.
Yeah.
Something to consider.
Yeah, no,
Market
can
board.
consider, but I know that Ken should be, of course, pushing that because with the enrollment numbers continuing to decline,
Exactly right.
yeah, he needs to be
Yeah.
figuring out ways to get more kids to come or retain in the town.
Talk to the Board of Finance about more money.
All right, if there are no other questions or discussion, we'll move along to item F, which is review the current fiscal year 19-20 budget statement.
So I think what's most important when understanding this particular budget presentation is that the salaries and all costs associated with salaries and overtime are a little bit skewed. And the reason for that is because of the 5 pay periods during the month of October in FY20. So in FY19, October, there were 4 pay periods. So there's an extra pay period in the presentation of this, just to give you a perspective when trying to compare expenditures from FY20 to FY19. Now, those normally would be skewed because of an increase in appropriation from one fiscal year to the next, but it's disproportionately higher for this particular presentation because of the extra pay period during FY20 October, just so you know. So consider that going forward when reading the report. There are a number of items that I think we're doing fairly well on. One being the police department, and right now they're understaffed, but it's caused an increase in overtime. But again, it's disproportionate because of the extra pay period. If you want to look at an indicator as to whether or not they're adhering to a fiscally prudent, responsible way of budgeting, I look at the way they're adjusting their holiday pay. I mean, the holiday pay will tell you there are only so many holidays that they can take on an annual basis, and comparatively to last year, they're doing the same numbers, almost the same as last year. So I think that's one indicator. One thing that is a problem for us right now is the electric bill. We're a little slow in implementing solar panels. And even that being said, comparatively, we are, with the same system, the same electrical system we're using as of last year, we're about $6,000 higher than what we were last year. And that being said, we did under budget this year, so we're anticipating a deficit for that particular line item going forward. But we'll continue to monitor, and hopefully we get a little bit more savings than we initially thought once we do switch to solar panel.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we weren't sure exactly what mention anything about that is. At the last meeting, we were trying to figure out had they actually gone live, or were we still holding off? I remember you said in November, I think early November is when we were shooting for.
So WPCA is online, Shepherd Hill is online, and Lucip Elementary is online.
Okay.
One thing we're definitely looking forward to trying to address is our risk management and workman's comp assessment from KERMA. As of right now, we're going to begin to review our safety process. We're going to start to invite KERMA and USI to those safety meetings to show them what we're trying to do to adhere with different OSHA regulations and different types of ways to bring down our overall costs associated to insurance. And that's the first step. We do have a third-party administrator, USI, that is helping us try to reevaluate every single step of that process. They're extremely helpful, and that is something to look forward to in terms of alternative ways to bring costs down and possibly institute some savings going forward into the next fiscal year. But that's one thing we're doing internally aside from just strictly cutting to try and enhance the overall safety of the employees of the town and try and at the same time make our town run more efficient and reduce costs.
Quick question on the highway, on supplies and expense, let's jacken that up a little bit.
I think it's more associated with some of the new mechanic that we have in town. And some of it has to do with the auction, leading up to the auction. I think there was advertisement associated with the auction expended in the month of October. So year to date, I would say that's what the 1.3 thousand increases is associated with. One thing I wanted to point out on the revenue is that what that has changed from the report that I had sent everybody on Monday night is the education cost share, the first line item. So one of the purposes of having this report comparatively looking back to the previous fiscal year is to understand what we had in terms of revenue and expenditures and whether or not there's a trend or an outlier to recognize. We noticed when creating this report last week that we had an education cost share of 3.7 million come in this time last year. But we didn't know where to look for it because of the standard process the state provides revenue. They usually send them via email, and I could go into greater detail as to how they do it, but for this particular source of funding, it was slightly different, and the way it was deposited into our bank account slightly changed, or is not the same as most standard funds are, like the rest of the revenue report. That being said, the creation of this report enabled us to figure out exactly where those funds were and understand the different places we had to look for it. So there are things that will change going forward in terms of what we in our internal controls and making sure that our processes are operating efficiently, and that's one example of it. Just so you guys know, we're trying to reevaluate all of our internal control processes throughout the Department of Finance to ensure that each budget for the previous month is closed within 10 days of the following month. Does that make sense to everybody? Right now, we're not exactly there, but we're working towards getting there. And the audit is part of that. The audit will provide enough findings for us to go back and rectify. I think last year there was one finding. With the change of auditors and the change of finance directors, we're not hoping, but hoping that they'll provide enough information for us to move forward in a way that will help us operate more efficiently.
And on the subject of audit, of course, we don't quite know yet as far as the extension, if we're going to be requiring that, but that's a possibility?
It is a possibility. I think by the end of next week, we should know. You know, the issue is communication with our previous audit firm, Mahoney and Sable. So in terms of providing trial balances from the Board of Education, Mahoney and Sable operated in a way that our current auditor could not determine. And the lack of communication on Mahoney and Sable's part created somewhat of a delay. And Mahoney and Sable did suggest that we consider, if we can't rectify the issue ourselves, we consider contracting a bookkeeper or consultant to help us expedite this process that Mahoney and Sable once did. So it would be more cost efficient if we were to go towards a consultant than to have Markham do it. And it would be regulatory complication if we asked Markham to do it themselves. There's a lack of oversight if they were to rectify the problem and also give the stamp of approval on moving forward with the audit. So it's something to consider. We're currently trying to figure it out on our own. It's one of a couple of issues, but that is the largest issue that we're trying to tackle.
I saw your note that if necessary, a representative would be willing to attend the next Board of Finance meeting.
Yep, we can. I've already discussed it in preparation for possibly having our head auditor come in and talk to the Board of Finance.
I would certainly like that.
The roof and highway garage done?
No.
It's a bad time of the year.
I understand. We are working towards getting that purchase for the vehicle, though. The vehicle is their truck. The vehicle is on its way, and it's making modifications right now in Connecticut, in Hartford. So once it's delivered, we'll figure out our financing options and move forward.
What is on there, metal standing seam? Roof on that garage?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Yes.
We should get that taken care of.
No, you should have had it taken care of.
I agree.
Ron, you remember last month we talked about that expense of the vacuum system for the pool? You remember?
I do.
Yeah, so we didn't have a lot of information on that, came up for discussion. Any updates on that, so I looked into?
I think Kathy might be able to speak on it better than I could.
Kathy, do you know anything more about that vacuum system? We didn't have a lot of information to go on, but I was curious as far as what was that gonna come in as for expense to replace?
So I know it was a little over $2,000 for that, I believe. Originally, they had thought it was going to be around $3,000, but, and you should have had that in your packet last month, the different quotes from that. And they had put money aside for pool maintenance, so I know it came out of that, Tom.
Okay.
But I know the quotes are available that they had. I had presented them to the finance department. Well, that information was given. So.
Just to circle back to the audit, if we do file an extension, are there going to be any penalty fees or additional fees if we actually do file the extension?
No, there's no penalty. It's a very common occurrence for a town to file an extension 1 month, even 2 months after they've changed the finance director and/or audit firm. And we did both.
And there's no additional fees like with our
No,
auditor either?
it's a standard issue. Again, the state has no issue with administering an extension. That it's a standard operating procedure.
Why do we need the extension?
And,
The auditor's not ready?
well, the auditor is trying to put together information that the previous auditor didn't provide, or is not providing.
The auditors are slowing us up.
Well, the previous auditors, not the current auditors.
Right.
And of course, all that will circle back to when we had our special meeting, talking about approving the annual report, not having the audit, and this past year, we had it ready and we had a special meeting, it was like in early January where we did it. Probably won't be the case with this, keeping in mind.
Yeah, there's, again, I'm gonna just reiterate. Filing an extension is a common occurrence. What you ask for 1 month at a time. You either ask for it to be able to file at the end of January, and if you're not ready at the end of January, you ask to file at the end of February. This is a standard operating procedure.
Brooklyn does it all the time.
There's some municipalities don't do it.
All right, any other questions or comments regarding the budget statement? If not, we will move on to citizens' participation. I open the floor. Kevin?
Kevin Cunningham, 405 Moose Pond Road. Quick question, on item D for the town vehicle. What was the actual number you voted for?
It was $20,042.25.
Okay. But I just asked if you wouldn't mind. This is a great time to do this right now. We've talked about this type of issue before where, I've got it highlighted over there. On the town charter, it states about I mean, you have the right to ask for money, which is great from the general fund, and the procurement policy you bypass. But the question comes into play with the charter where you're asking for over a certain amount of money, and it spells it out pretty clearly there that if it's something that happens during the time frame of the year where you need to go to a town meeting for a certain amount of money, anything over $10,000 up to 50 is a town meeting. Anything over 50,000 requires that you go to a referendum. So I would ask if you would consider to actually set it up as a town meeting to approve. I'm positive that this is going to go through, because you need it.
Mm-hmm.
Something is absolutely needed. But just to follow that, it would be probably the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Is that something the selectman has to call for?
Actually, this is a different format because,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's what I was considering. So technically, the way it would normally work is this would have been discussed first at the Board of
Yeah.
Selectmen meeting, and then when we were discussing it now, that would have already been.
right. But now that you've already passed and approved the monies to go forward, I don't see a problem with going forward too.
Okay. Yeah. So that's something that we need to consider.
Yeah. Just do it.
Okay. Entertain a motion that the approval that we made for the $20,042.25 purchase of the new town vehicle go to town meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to send it to town meeting.
You go ahead and set a date for that so they've already been.
Yeah, well, that was another thing I was gonna ask. So does the Board of Selectmen have to set that date, or we can?
You now that you put it to town meeting, it's actually on your plate.
Okay, so we can set it. All right. So that's the other thing to consider, is the date. What are the thoughts of the members as far as date to be set.
Now, is there a certain amount of time for notice in between the meeting?
What is it?
I'm not sure, is it, Kevin?
I believe it's a 10-day period, I'm not positive.
Yeah. 10 sounds right, I remember that in the past. But again, so is this something that we'd want to be setting within the next 2 weeks?
Yep.
3 weeks, when?
As soon as possible, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
do it as soon as possible.
Mhm. Okay, so what about looking at the first week of December?
I'm looking at it.
Okay. Could set it for Monday? Yeah, Monday the 2nd. All right,
Sounds like a plan.
yeah. So I would just entertain a motion just to make that official, that would be setting the town meeting for 7 o'clock on Monday, December 2nd.
So
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries to send that to town meeting at 7 o'clock on December 2nd, Monday, here at the town hall.
I have to get it to the clerk, right?
Kevin, thank you. Was there anything else that you had to add on that? No? All right. Back to citizens participation. I open the floor.
Small Central Village, who will be in charge of putting the signs out that there's a town meeting vote coming up, so you'll have your 25 people? Is that the selectmen or the board of finance or the maintenance?
we'll make sure that was a.
Because your last town meeting, you didn't have your 25 people.
Right.
That meeting, was that to vote on the audit? Was that to vote on?
No. Basically, all that could have been done at that meeting if we'd had the 25 people is we would give a status update of where we stood with the annual report, which is we had narratives that were put together but not approved yet by the Board of Finance, and of course, nowhere near getting the audit ready. So that was going to be basically discussed or explained to the people, and then that was basically how it was going to be left. There was no way that the people could approve the narrative or the audit because none of it's ready.
Another idea for the town to bring in business. Our town doesn't have a campground or RV ground. And if you had something like that in town, people, this would be the base. And then if they wanted to go to the casino, they could head off to the casino. They could head up in the quiet corner. But I've always found that in tourism to be lacking in our town.
That's a good point. We certainly have a business, a local business to support that. Thank you, Sue. Anything else? Yeah.
Travis Plon on 116 New Road, Moosa. Given that we're buying a used vehicle, has any of our town mechanics looked at the vehicle?
Before the purchase is made, we definitely have a mechanic take a look at it.
Can that be done before we vote on it? Just to inform the people that it's not like a roach shop piece of crap. Because having heard for the bus garage, we bought used buses from a flood in Louisiana in the past. And having been a mechanic at that time, it was nothing but problems.
I think in terms of the procurement process, and you know, I can't speak on purchasing Pleasant buses, but I can assure you that before the purchase is made, just like the highway truck that we're purchasing, we'll take a look at the vehicle before any type of funds are transferred in exchange for the purchase. If that were the case, we don't have the manpower or the time to look at every single vehicle on this list. And prior to expediting this process, but we're fairly certain, based on the reputation of the dealer, that it will be a good vehicle. And again, before any funds are wasted, the vehicle will be looked at. It's just a matter of process at this point. I do appreciate your concern.
I mean, I think that if the money was already allocated for a certain vehicle, then there's only one vehicle to look at.
But again, the funds won't be expensed if the vehicle is in poor condition.
Just seems like a backwards waste of time to have a whole town meeting and to vote on a vehicle that you don't even know if it's good. And that's totally backwards thinking in my opinion. When you go buy a car for yourself, you go look at it before you allocate any kind of money.
But that's exactly what we're doing. We're not gonna expend the funds prior to looking at the vehicle. We just purchased a van for the animal control department, and we made sure that the police, the mechanic at the police department took a look at the van before any type of funds were exchanged.
I still think that it's going to be a waste if you spend the town's time, energy, and resources to have a vote, and then come to find out after the fact that the car's no good.
I think what you're not allocating for is the amount of manpower and waste of time that it would take to look at every single vehicle, which is what you're requesting prior to us allocating the funds.
Kyle, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just want to add, I don't know if you know Chris Messier, he lives in town, he's born in town. I called him, he's the one that gave me the lead on this. They said we can take the van, for Jeep for 3 or 4 days, drive it around, see how we like it, have our mechanics look at it, and if we don't like it, we don't have to buy it.
Okay, well, I mean, that should have been brought up for the people that are all here tonight. And it should be brought up at the town
I
meeting.
could have it here tomorrow to drive around.
No, I don't need to see it in person, I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
No,
We're trying to make smart
we will
purchases and
definitely
people
do
have a
our
lot of
due diligence.
concerns. It just seems like
I mean,
Perfect.
chances are, if the vehicle is 6,000 miles, isn't probably gonna have a lot wrong with it.
well, they made Yugos and
But
Ford
we will
Aerostars
look
too.
No, that was a very valid point, and you're right, it would have been.
And DeLoreans.
Thank you.
Maureen Sullivan, Milford, Connecticut. I agree. I can't imagine you voting tonight to purchase that vehicle and you haven't looked at it or examined it.
Well, it's not purchased.
No, it hasn't been, but you certainly were allocating the funds tonight. Weren't you voting on this tonight?
Sure.
All right, I rest my case.
It didn't, you know, we had the option of voting on it tonight or possibly looking at it back, you know, farther down the road. But the funds are there. Whether or not we decide to make the purchase or not is more of what you're talking about. Allocating the funds, those funds can be pulled back. And in terms of processes, I think it's more efficient to look at the purchase, or look at the car prior to it being purchased than looking at all the vehicles that we could possibly look at. It's just not time efficient for us to have a mechanic look at every single car on this list.
Sean Peterson,
Yeah.
Plainfield. My question is was that the least expensive vehicle of the list?
When we're comparing mileage and expense, yes, it was.
Bottom line, out of all those vehicles, that was the cheapest vehicle on your list.
Well, when going through a procurement process.
Okay.
It's
That was my
not.
question.
You need a little bit more context in that,
No,
because there are
I'm
other
not.
variables.
I'm asking if it's the cheapest.
What we did was we looked at the cars that were available based on the specifications that we are looking for, and we found an exact vehicle. Now, again, you know, as you probably already know, cars move on and off lots
Correct.
all the time, so.
So it should have never been said that it's gonna be for this vehicle. It should have been said, we're gonna spend X number of dollars on a vehicle to meet our criteria.
Well, you have to look at what's available, and when you're considering all the variables, like mileage, like long-term usage, like the specifications required for that particular those particular tasks and standards, we came up with a list of vendors, very similar to the state bid list. What they do is they provide a list of vendors and a list of cars in their inventory. What we did, based on the emergency procurement rules, was simulate that type of process, and it's exactly, it's an efficient way, especially in the time crunch that we're working with.
I
And if you
understand.
want a specific dollar amount allocated, the variance in the dollar amount that you're talking about is about $3,000. We just think that this purchase for this vehicle is a smarter purchase based on the mileage.
I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying, instead of saying we're gonna purchase this vehicle at this price, you should have said we're gonna allocate X number of dollars for a vehicle to meet this criteria. And then it wouldn't matter which vehicle you ended up buying in the end, and if it was cheaper, it was cheaper, if it was more expensive.
I think if you look through the packet, the prices are comparable. I think there's one vehicle, maybe two, that are about $1,000, $2,000 less than the
Thank you.
Yeah,
Which
but
part-
Sean, I see what you're saying, because it kind of goes back to when we talked about the computer purchase. You know, at the time, we approved that funding for the computer purchase, we did not say we're going with, you know, this exact model Dell or HP or whatever. We said we have upwards of this amount that we're approving, and Kyle, of course, has reported back to us with what we ended up going with, what we're gonna. In the case of the vehicle, that's not how it was, we did specifically note it.
I think you
That being
should.
said, though, that being said, IT procurement is completely different from vehicle procurement. We have an inventory that's available with the car purchases. IT is a lot easier to procure on a massive scale than it is for an individual car. So there's
Right,
different
but that
procurement.
car might not be there tomorrow when you go, or whenever you go to buy it.
You're
What are you gonna
absolutely
do then?
Yeah, doesn't that
Now you're gonna have to come back again and get approval
Yeah.
again. If you're giving them just, we're gonna spend X number of dollars on this vehicle, then you wouldn't have to come back again.
I think we would only need approval if we were to go over the amount that was allowed. If we were
Because
to
you said you're gonna purchase a Toyota route, whatever it was.
to G.
Yeah.
No,
Somebody said Toyota.
no.
Oh, all right.
So only if we
Yeah,
need,
I thought it was Toyota Renegade.
so we have $20,000 allocated. And if we need more than that in the event that the
I
car
just wish
is
you'd said that.
hypothetically,
Yeah,
Not to exceed X number of dollars.
yeah, no, like I said, Sean, I understand your point. Thank you. Yes,
How come the roof on the highway department hasn't been done? I thought that was an emergency, I thought it was a safety issue, that's why we had to get that roof, there was water leaking, so,
They can start at any time now.
right. How come that hasn't gotten done?
I can't speak on that.
Why not?
I think.
Tom, can you find that out for us, please?
I can, yes.
And my second question is about the overage on the utilities, is that on every department?
It's the line items for the town's electrical department, so,
So it's just that the overage is
for the
6,000?
entire town, yep.
Okay, and it says on there it's anticipating that it'll go up?
No, I'm saying that, we're anticipating that we might run a deficit on that line item.
And the solar panels that are hooked up are only hooked up at certain schools, or are they also hooked up on some of the municipal buildings?
They're hooked up on the municipal buildings, they just haven't been switched on.
So they're hooked, they're just not switched off? How come that we didn't take this into consideration, or if this wasn't brought to the Board of Finance earlier, when you knew there was gonna be this issue? It was addressed to you after multiple meetings,
As far as what,
that you were gonna have a deficit in this line item because you were gonna go over budget.
at what point, I'm just curious to know, at what point,
Did I or did I not have a conversation with you multiple times after Board of Finance meetings that I did not believe that you were gonna come in line item with the budget? Kim Medlin and me had a conversation with you about this because the solar panels weren't hooked up and that there was gonna be a deficit. So I'm just wondering how come we're coming with this now and maybe not earlier on,
are we talking, so,
that we're over budget with the utilities?
hold up, I guess what I'm trying to just understand what I'm accountable for. So as far as the
You're accountable for
creation
the
of the
fact that you
budget,
told us.
absolutely. No, hold on, let me, yeah. So when creating the budget, absolutely, we thought that the solar panels would be hooked up a lot sooner. In terms of allocating costs or incurring costs over the course of the fiscal year up until this point, we were tracking and up until this point, we hadn't run over. So up until this,
So when did you start running over?
electrical costs are,
When did you start running over budget? Is a direct question.
I think last month's budget report showed that we were running over. So
And did I not speak to you the month before that?
I do understand that we've had conversations about this, as far as presenting it and understanding it and letting everybody know when we think that the projections will.
We kind of knew all along that this was going to be a potential issue.
Regardless of.
And just like I have concerns with the audit, because you're saying that we're not gonna pay a penalty, how many extensions are the state gonna allow us?
There's no cost associated with filing an extension.
So how many extensions are we going to potentially be looking at needing?
I'm anticipating one, but again, we have to wait until the end of the
So
week.
Mr. Cunningham, will we get a penalty in February if we do not have the audit completed?
There's a possibility of
right, so what I would request is if, Ron, if you can connect with Kevin, obviously on that on the side, and we will have more information. Obviously.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Other citizen participation? Yep.
How much money did the town make on the auction?
$34,000 after costs back to the auctioneer.
Did you realize that the Board of Ed needed a trailer? And did you auction off a trailer?
I did not know that the Board of Ed needed a trailer.
So I'm suggesting more communication between.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Any other citizens participation?
Dan Real, Doherty Ave. I think, as we all know, the town is still litigating against itself. I have basically three concerns. And I understand the plaintiff was intending to do right. They were rightly concerned about safety and following the law and all that. But at the end of the day, there was an appeal, and obviously the zoning board is suing the zoning board of appeals. I have three concerns. One is whether the suit was properly authorized by a formal vote of the Board of Selectmen to begin with. And going to the same point is two, whether the parties were proper, because the charter says that all suits are brought in the name of the Board of Selectmen. So that's probably a subject matter jurisdictional issue. If we can answer the question, I think internally we could save a lot of money. And rather than going to trial January 8th, there was a brief due January 15th. I appreciate the fact that the parties have tried to work this out, and I hope eventually they do. But their brief that was due on November 15th would have, probably informed of the substance of the appeal, which unfortunately the complaint really fails to do. So the second concern I have is, let's say we answer the question, in the affirmative, that this was properly done internally. Now we have a different issue of other boards and commissions where there's an appeal process involved. Say like the tax collector saying, a property like McDonald's files an appeal with the Board of Assessment Appeals, McDonald's gets its way, and now the tax collector goes, I really didn't like that decision. I think I'm going to bring the Board of Assessment Appeals to court. So that's a really big one. I don't want to open up that can of worms. And I think if we're really thinking forward, that's a reasonable concern going forward. So I'm hoping the town can, continue to work things out. And the final item is, there is a phone conference tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. And I'm hoping the Board of Selectmen can get together and, obviously put together their own answer to the first question. Second of all, try to get the parties to somehow arrive at a solution which could prevent a lot of chaos and confusion and unnecessary expense going forward.
Dan? Any other citizen participation? Yeah.
When did you find out that Adams Company will not allow another grocery store? You said, Kathy, you said that.
Kathy, yeah.
So this was information given to me after Better Value closed, because Bizzuto, I guess, is something to do with Big Y, and that is actually who is handling.
Right, so they were talking, the Board of Finance spent a lot of time talking about getting a grocery store in there when you didn't realize that there's been some kind of a back room. With Adams Company and Big Y not to put a grocery store in there. So if somebody looked at online or looked at the deed or looked at whatever the settlement was with the company, then you would have found out that no grocery store, sounds like no grocery store will ever go in there.
Not from my understanding, but I was told.
Well, I would definitely check on that, because you spent a lot of time calling all these different companies to put a grocery store in. But I think there is information out there that there won't be a grocery store. And it has something to do with Big Y and Adams Company, which was Better Value, and some kind of land swap in Massachusetts. So there are people that have businesses along Route 12 that know something about this.
I agree with you, Sue. I believe that there needs to be a lot more information. I think presented to the public about this, because as I've talked to many people and sometimes read on social media, there's a lot of things going out there as far as rumors, what can come to town, what can't, what is, what's not. People have their own, thoughts as far as what they'd like to see in town, but they're not aware of kind of the parameters in some cases. So what I would personally like to see in the future is maybe an economic development presentation, some type of formal presentation in the auditorium where I think a lot of this information could be brought to the citizens' attention. Not necessarily taking up an entire Board of Finance meeting for it, but it's very useful information.
Well, if you get on a website called LoopNet, it shows the commercial property for sale in Plainfield. The new Dollar General, there's something, the new one that was put in Plainfield on Route 12. Why is it on LoopNet for sale, or are they trying to franchise it? And also on there is Citizens Bank. Looks like Citizens Bank has been trying to sell that property. So I just want to make you aware that that's information out there that was given to me to look at, and how much the value of the property is along the Route 12 corridor.
No, that's great information, and again, not something that, I'm happy that you were able to bring that information to us, but we didn't necessarily know that as a Board of Finance, and I know there's a lot of other people out there who are not aware. So, thank you.
In the final analysis, the Board of Finance is not gonna do this. We were just throwing out ideas. Economic development is going to be doing that. All these questions you have for the economic development, you might wanna take a few minutes and go to one of their meetings and present them with the information. We're not gonna go out and look for businesses. That's not.
Oh, I know that.
That's
I know
not
that.
our job.
Yeah, you were talking about possibilities.
So what you need to do, if you have the time, address either the selectmen or that committee that does that job.
Yeah, and same thing with you, Dan, obviously, some of the concerns that you were talking to us about, I know you've attended Board of Selectmen meetings, and I'm sure you will continue. to
Right,
bring
and
those
I
concerns.
raise them to this board because it will have, an uncomfortable impact financially when up to the trial, most likely on appeal, and some of the fallout potential from, say, the tax assessor whoever is eventually in the future gets this wonderful idea of, hey, Board of Assessment Appeals said this guy's right, I disagree, I'm taking him to court. So it introduces way too much uncertainty.
Other citizens' participation? No? All right. Seeing none, just before I entertain a motion to adjourn, again, want to congratulate our newly elected officials, our Board of Selectmen, our new Board of Finance members, Mr. Matt Raden, in filling the vacancy this evening at the alternate position. Also, I just want to go on record and definitely thanking Scott Trowwood, Scott Gardner, and David Saros for their time on the Board of Finance. It's like all boards and commissions, you got to remember we're all volunteers. We take a lot of time out of our schedule to invest into the town and to do our best for the best interest of the town. So again, both former members and current members, thank you for your commitment to the town of Plainfield and the Board of Finance. And on that note, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. Motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.